Good morning and welcome to Paris. Well, no, actually it's Astana, but this is the Arch of Triumph. The reason I'm starting down here today, because I'm quite a bit out of the city, is because I have a theory. And that theory is that Astana has tried to build lots of fantastical buildings, but in doing so, it has stolen many of them from the great empires of the world to try and bring a little bit of history to what is a brand new city. So what I'm going to do is have a wander about and have a look at all the weird and wonderful architecture and have a look at a couple of the parks and things like that as well. This is the Ishim River, and it looks like a whole new channel has been cut for it when they were building the city, and it just flows all the way through the city, right through, and they've built this promenade the whole way down along it. You can walk the whole way through the city on it. In the magazine it said that it was full of people walking and swimming. It's really not, I'm afraid. There's never anybody here, save for a couple of fishermen and a couple of wrestlers out for a run. But it's a lovely walk, to be honest. It's delightful. Plus, because there's nobody here, you can enjoy it all to yourself. And just over here, there's a little facsimile of Big Ben. Astana is full of plenty of these beautiful landscape parks. They're just really far from anywhere. They're never in a particularly convenient location, not a distance that you can walk to, and not all of them are particularly well kept, like this one is. It's a bit of a shame. They're completely empty. There's nobody here whatsoever. There's this thing here for children to play on, and there's nobody there. That's another thing about the parks. There really is only ever one way in and one way out. So you follow a path to the edge and you just can't get out. And for some reason they've built these slightly strange concrete fountains and tried to make them look as if they were built out of stone, when it's really very obvious that they weren't.
Фотограф?
Да. Yeah, photograph. Behind gates and security guards with guns or security guards or army. This is the presidential library, and actually I think is one of the prettiest buildings here. I'm not too sure why they've got it all locked away. I'm sure their books must be very precious, but people should be able to read them. It's not really a library, it's more of a museum, although it does hold President Nazarbayev's collection of books, his own personal books, and gifts that were given to him by different world leaders and things like that. It's also full of different artifacts of Kazakhstan and the USSR and things like that. It's another Norman Foster design building, like the pyramid across the water. And I think this is much prettier than the pyramid. It's meant to be an eye that's pointing up toward, looking up towards the sky. And yeah, I think it's quite a pretty building. Astana is a very eccentric city, and the Astana Central Concert Hall is one of the most eccentric buildings here. It's quite pretty compared to some of the others, but it's been nicknamed the Cabbage. It's actually right beside the Presidential Palace, but we'll be coming back to that later. For the meantime, I'm going to get walking to the other side of the city. I should say before I forget that this video was sponsored by Drone Pro, who taught me how to fly Stenka. They're a Czech company who sell drones, as well as teaching people how to use them, how to fly them safely, and they're good fun. So check out the link in the comments below.
Staring at the stars in the back of my car, trying to figure out just who we are. Catching moments on our phones, taking pictures, call it home. Picking words out of our favorite songs, our favorite songs. We can stay up all night. Yeah, we'll show them we were right. The city is ours for life.
I'm up in the north of the city now, and that's just to try and find some of the older Soviet buildings. And even they are starting to disappear now. They're being replaced by shiny new ones like this, or shinier new ones like this. That's because this is the oldest part of the city, really. It was an old Soviet city before it became Astana, and actually it's much windier here, so I'm just going to do this, because hopefully you can hear me okay. So yes, it was an old Soviet city, and now it has completely changed.
I make you laugh, trying to heal the pain.
But while northern Astana is much older, that also means that it feels much more lived in. It sort of feels more comfortable. There's more people walking around on foot here, for example. You know, people are just used to life in a city here that actually they don't seem to be quite so much in the south of the city. But presumably this culture will slowly be erased and it'll become much more like the south of the city. I just noticed that PS4 gaming club, and I have a theory as to why there's plenty of those about. And that is that the average wage in Kazakhstan is about $70 a month. Obviously in Astana it's much more. An office worker can pull in $300 to $350 a month, and then there's people who are just earning stupid amounts of money. But that's just far too little to buy a PlayStation or an Xbox and to be able to afford to buy games. So presumably everybody just goes to these coffee shops and hires some time on the PlayStation, plays a little bit of FIFA or whatever.
Will you take my hand tonight? Take my... We can stay up all night. Yeah, we'll show them we were right. The city is ours for life. Will you take my hand tonight? We can stay up
There are still these little bits of old Astana. Astana that hasn't been rebuilt or destroyed. These little brick houses with their corrugated iron roofs that the city is really quite rapidly encroaching upon. I have a feeling they won't be here for too much longer. Even the wires here are dangling just over my head. Sort of like this is what Kazakhs actually live like. When you get out into the country, these are the sorts of houses that you see more of. And up in the north of Astana, there's loads more on the outskirts. We're in the south right now. And it's just very different to the centre. And all this land here, it's not land that just isn't used, it's not arable land or fallow land even. It's just land that hasn't been developed yet. We're not even on the very edge of the city. There's another massive row of apartment blocks there, and all the way down there behind us. At some point, this will all just be covered again, as will these buildings. And here we have the Kazakh entry into the international largest flag competition. That is currently ruled by the UAE. I'm not sure where the UAE's flag is, I haven't seen it, but I've now seen ones in Jordan, Bishkek and Astana. One thing that I should note about Astana is that it is very much a car city. It was not designed for walking at all. The main strip through the centre is easily 3 kilometres long. Everything else is another 2 to 3 kilometres away from that. You could walk it if you wanted to, but you might prefer to get a taxi. I am back in the centre, and this is Astana Opera House. And the thing about this building is, while it's perfectly nice, it may as well be the Parthenon from Athens. And the question I have is, why is that? Like, why would they possibly build a building that has no roots in Kazakh culture? It's a difficult question, and I don't really understand why it is. I have a theory, and that is that there's a deliberate sort of import of different cultures to try and give the city of Astana some history, but I don't know. There's this big huge plaza out in front of it that is a favourite for skateboarders and also for weddings. This is where everybody comes to get their photo taken in their big white dresses. the shadow of the sun shining through the yurt again, the same as on the Kyrgyz flag. Here we have the Concha tier, which is really quite a daring building. It's another Norman Foster one, and it's the largest tent in the world. But my question is, after seeing the Opera House, is why build this? The reason it's a tent is because Kazakh nomadic culture, it's based on living in tents. So why have they built something that is so firmly rooted in Kazakh culture here, and just over there, they're stealing from other cultures? This is the Nur Alem Mosque with its amazing golden roof and minarets. It's nowhere near as grand as the one on the right bank of the river, but it's still incredibly beautiful, I think. But again, this is now built in the classical Arabic style, and it's just another mix of everything that's going on. Astana is full of fountains, by the way, and fountains are, in Islam, a sign of paradise, of purity. So there's plenty of those about.
We be busting the clubs cause you know that we can. Can't fuck with the gang, we don't fucking pretend. Still rocking the show, still feeling the flow. Swagger on point when I step in. Signs in the air for the gang that you're repping. Don't get brave when I'm stepping in the rave. If you show man love, everything's okay, so...
If I'm honest, I lied earlier when I said the presidential palace may have been my favourite building. It's probably these two towers, one of which houses the Ritz-Carlton. They just feel like the sort of classic, proper skyscrapers that are quite beautiful to look at. And I'm not much of a fan of skyscrapers. But I really like how the pillars go up into a sort of gradient that stretches across them, and how the marble cladding just looks lovely. I really like it.
Show man a sign if you're down for the gang. Can't fuck with the gang, we don't fucking pretend. We be busting the clubs cause you know that we can. Can't fuck with the gang, we don't fucking pretend. Still rocking the show, still feeling the flow.
And this then is an interesting one, because while it fits with my theory about Astana being full of architecture stolen from the great empires, this pagoda is owned by a Chinese company, it appears. And so the Chinese have a habit of building skyscraper pagodas, and I think that's exactly what's just happened here. But It fits with the general theme.
We all wanna be a little stronger. Each fall takes a piece out of our hearts. So I'll run away into the darkest parts of me. I need a change desperately. I thought love was a lost art till you showed me some sanctuary. Now I never wanna let you go. Never gonna let you go until we're both those souls running out for love. You were there with open arms when I thought love was a lost art.
The main strip of Astana, the Boulevard Varnerskaya, which stretches all the way from the Concha here down to the presidential palace. And at the minute it is full of an art exhibition called Nomad Energy to celebrate the expo being in town. But it's also surrounded by all of these horrendous skyscrapers. And I truly think that what has happened is that they've gone, a modern city must have skyscrapers, so let's build some skyscrapers, with no real thought about what they're actually building, which I think is a bit of a theme in Astana. Other than the sort of landmark buildings that they have, the things that are stolen, the Chinese pavilions, pagodas, the Greek Parthenon and the others, there's not too much thinking going on. It's just, let's do this. The Boulevard Varnerskaya is really heavily manicured, and it's full of these silvery animals made out of lots of different little shapes, which are actually, I think they're quite pretty. But it's this building here that really gets me. I think it is truly one of the most disgusting buildings I have ever seen in my entire life, and it's awful. Don't even ask me what this Dr. Robotnik style egg is, but at least it's better than this. So this is the TØAK, which is both weird and wonderful, and it's a sort of symbol of Kazakhstan. It's meant to be a tree with a golden egg laid on top, and that golden egg was laid by Merk, who's a mythical bird, and again another symbol of Kazakhstan. You can see him on top of the pillars on the other side of the river, and also on top of the presidential palace. stretch now, down another long manicured bit, and these buildings on my left and right are just horrible apartments really for diplomats and apparatchiks and functionaries, people who need to or want to live close to the president. And we have these two great hulks. Don't know who designed them. Horrible golden. Blech. They're nicknamed the beer cans here, and they're like the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and then banks in the other, and various offices and things like that. But they're absolutely disgusting. They're also kind of intimidating. Something interesting is that when you get down to the presidential palace, there's this huge big space, and it's completely empty. Nobody ever goes there.
I can't stop, these feelings taking over me. I can't stop, these feelings taking over me. I can't stop, these feelings taking over me. I can't stop, these feelings taking over me.
And hopefully you can see what I mean by it being completely empty. Like these two citadels just, I think they intimidate people from coming through. Nobody wants to come down and see the president. Poor President Nazarbayev, he must be lonely.
Feeling me, I can't.
This one here is the Supreme Court. And that must be why it looks so fascistic and intimidating. I also happen to think this one's probably picked up from the Roman Empire, because that's sort of what they did, isn't it? It's also terribly ugly for lifting something from somewhere else. Sorry. We finish with the TØAK, the presidential palace, which to me looks as if it was lifted straight from Washington, the White House. Except this time, they put a blue roof on top. The bird at the top is Merk, who laid the biter X egg, and there's a little tiny globe above him, or her, if she's laying eggs. So yeah, Astana sort of just seems to have lifted buildings. There's the pyramid above the water with the Slavic colonnade and pillar. There's the Greek one at the end. This one, I think, could be Roman. This one is American. What I think they've done is they've gone through all the empires and tried to pick something that defines them and import that as their own piece of culture. Why? I'm not entirely sure. But then they've mixed it with these horrible buildings that seem to have nothing to do with Kazakh culture, and buildings that are based on Kazakh culture. It's confusing, and it's a confusing city. And that is why it's better than Dubai, for example, because this has a charm. But anyway, that's me for today. Click like if you enjoyed it, leave us a wee comment if you liked it, and do hit subscribe. Bye!